All right, good afternoon, everyone. And I hope I am saying good afternoon to everyone in all of our locations. I'm sure people are just coming back into the rooms. It's always the hard part of conferences is breaking up all that great conversation that's happening over lunches. So hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. We wanted to thank the local caterers for providing a great lunch at each of our locations. Quick reminder, because there has been a couple of questions, all of today is being recorded. The PowerPoints, all of that stuff will be made available, as well as a post-conference report that answers everybody's questions that have been coming up throughout this. And all of that will make its way to the DCS website. And information about when that gets shared, will be sent to all participants. So welcome back. Hope everyone is energized and excited for a great afternoon. I have a fantastic co-host for this afternoon, John Cox. And John and I will now tell you about the next part of our conference and introduce the panel. Over to you.
Okay. In the next session, we will hear from three different people talk about a good life in the community. Each one will have a different views. We will hear from Charles McConville, who is joining us from Truro. Charles formerly lived in an institution and is now living in the community in New Glasgow. And Charles is also a member of People First Nova Scotia. And I'm really excited to hear from him. I've met him only a couple years ago, and I'm really excited about that. The second member of the panel is a parent. Stephanie Carver will be joining us from Sydney, Nova Scotia. Along with being a parent, Stephanie is the board chair of Inclusion Nova Scotia.
Thanks, John. And the third member of our panel is Hilary Ahmet. Hilary is the former executive director of Highland Community Residential Services. Hilary has recently retired from his role, but has certainly not retired from service. And to help lead our conversation, we have Barb Horner. Barb is a parent, and she's also a founding member of the Disability Rights Coalition. Barb is going to be asking, Barb will ask each of our panel members some questions, and then we will take some questions from the audience. I'm sure you can appreciate across all of these sites, we've got a large number of participants joining us today. Our goal is to take one from each location and one from online. If there's time, we will take more questions. Here's where we are going to remind people about patience and the power of the internet. This is our panel this afternoon that's taking place in various locations. So if there are any glitches, please bear with us. We are working as quickly as we can to resolve any of them. And with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for being with us today and hand things over to Barb.
Thank you, and thank you, John, for introducing the panel. I would just like to say, as a founding member of the Disability Rights Coalition, we've come a long way, baby. Right? My daughter Mallory introduced me to the world of disability 38 years ago, and it's been a long road as a parent and for our family. But today marks a path forward. We've received recognition and validation for the past harm of institutions and the lack of choice for families. And it gives us such an opportunity to really dream for the future. And remember, just because this has never existed before in Nova Scotia does not mean it isn't possible. So dream big. Know that there are organizations who are gearing up to support community ongoing. The Disability Rights Coalition still needs your support. We are continuing this conversation on December 9th, so tune in. Inclusion Nova Scotia is gearing up to support families as well, so please reach out and get involved. So I am asking a couple of questions to our panel today. And we're going to go to Truro to start with. Charles, in Truro, what is the most important thing you want to say about the remedy? And it can be more than one thing.
It is important to me that institutions are finally closing. I was forced to live in a locked unit for 5 years. I was told when to eat and when to sleep. I had no rights. I wouldn't want anyone else to go through what I had to. Now I feel grateful that this is finally stopping, and that no one else will have to go through what I had to.
Thank you, Charles. It's sometimes not easy to talk about these our life situations, but really important that these stories be told and that we hang on to them so we continue to move forward. Next, we are going to Sydney to hear from Stephanie. The same question, Stephanie. What is the most important thing you want to say about the remedy?
Thanks, Barb. I think that I am in a really exciting position. I am a mother of 3 young men in their 20s. We supported our 2 older children who are neurotypical through this kind of transition in life. Our youngest son, Peter, is 20, and he'll be leaving school this year. And for me, the remedy is going to be about dreaming for him a life that is completely different from the life I would have imagined even 5 years ago. I'm one of those families that felt that we were going towards a cliff after school. And I think that the remedy and the individualized funding that comes with that and the connections that families are going to be able to make together is going to give us an opportunity to imagine something for him and to actualize a life for him that is completely different from anything I could have imagined. And I think it's actually really exciting for families of kids who are younger than my son, because we're going to pave the way a little bit and iron out a few of the kinks and the wrinkles and normalize that inclusive life and community. So I think it's really exciting, and it's also scary. We talked about that earlier because it's something that's not in front of us in Nova Scotia. For Nova Scotian communities, I think it for me does feel scary. But for me, the remedy and the values that come with that feels very right to me.
Thank you, Stephanie. Finally, Hillary, same question.
Barbara, as you said, this has been a long time coming. And what I want to say about the remedy is that it's a world full of possibilities and opportunity for all of us. And when I say us, I'm thinking about every single person in Nova Scotia, because earlier today, this morning, I was listening to language, and I was hearing they, I was hearing participant, I was hearing ours, possessive. And then Tim, at his closing comments, got up and started talking about 3 names, John, Jack, and somebody else. And I said to myself, oops, I'm going to have to change my language. I'm going to have to learn a whole new vocabulary about how I and every one of us interact as we go forward into this fantastic set of opportunities that's ahead of us. That's what I want to say about the remedy.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you. Great insights from everyone. Thank you. And we're going to go back to Charles in Truro for our second question. It's a bit of a 3-part question, Charles. What does a good life in your local community look like to you? What works well? What doesn't work well that needs to be worked on?
I now get to choose where I want to live and what type of work I want to do. I live in my own apartment, and I have a great job at Summer Street in Industries, doing catering and lawn care. But best of all, I get to make my own decisions. I also have great staff supports with my life skills and at work. This is what life should look like for everyone. The fact that the remedy is finally happening, it will help others in the future to give them a say over their life and have their voices heard. Everyone will now have rights and be able to express them.
Thank you, Charles.
I'm not done.
Oh, sorry.
Everyone deserves to have affordable housing and enough money to live on. Right now, there is a huge housing shortage, which needs to be rectified. And also, money is tight for many ILS clients in the province. That budget left for, I am happy to speak on behalf of all ILS clients in the province that our budget, after we pay rent and utilities, we have very little left for groceries. There also seems to be a problem with staff mileage, which this isn't in there, but I feel for all ILS clients in the province, the rate for mileage for staff taking us out needs to be increased. I think we have wonderful staff, but we really need more qualified staff who will respect our rights and in integrity and also be supportive. I have been through mental health numerous times. We need more one-on-one mental health therapy. I have high hopes for this remedy and that it will continue to develop within the 5-year plan.
Thank you, Charles. Stephanie, we're on to you in Sydney with the same question.
That's a hard answer to follow. So, what does a good life in community look like? It's not always good, right? It's a typical life has peaks and valleys. And I really think about, as a parent, I talked earlier about my 3 children and their actualization of their dreams is imperfect. And it's sometimes exciting, and it's sometimes disappointing, and it's sometimes a little terrifying, and sometimes they get that win, that exciting moment. And I really think that a good life in community for Peter, my youngest son, is going to be the exact same thing. He's going to have the same journey of things that go well, things that don't go well, loneliness, feeling included, but he's going to have an inclusive life in community. A good life in community is all of that nuance. It's not always happy. It's not lonely, but it's included, and it's the right to be there. And it really is his opportunity to follow his interests, his talents, his likes, and his preferences, just like his brothers did, and his peer friends as well. I think about what works in community already. And, you know, the inclusion movement really we're riding on the wave of a lot of minority or marginalized communities who have really spoken out over the past few years. We're riding the wave of Black Lives Matter, residential school survivors, folks who feel comfortable talking about gender identity, and any other marginalized group has already come before us, and we go with them. And I think that that's what's working, is that we have a comfort level of talking about inclusion and what that means and how our communities need to be inclusive. And a quote that I found on social media that I kind of stored on my phone, and it kind of echoes what Anna was talking about earlier about how we are all responsible for inclusion. It's not just a thing that you kind of pass over and go, here you go, have some inclusion, like a cup of water. Inclusion is not about bringing people into what already exists. It's about making new space, and that space ends up being better space for all of us. So then what needs to happen? We need to learn from people who already are doing it well. The nice thing is we don't really have to reinvent the wheel. We have Tim, we have Eddie. I think we're going to be hearing from Lorna a little bit later. We need to give parents the right to come together and to talk about their shared dreams. We need to facilitate that. I am so grateful to have found the inclusion movement through Inclusion Nova Scotia and to have connected with families outside of Nova Scotia, because I can tell you, Nova Scotian families, there are families outside of Nova Scotia who have figured things out way better than I have, but they give me permission to dream about that and to go beyond anything I ever imagined for my son. It's possible. So I think that we need that in our province. And I really believe that Nova Scotians have big hearts and big imaginations and big possibility, and that once we kind of listen to each other, that those possibilities will come true for our loved ones.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And Hillary, the same question for you.
Well, a good life in the community, what does it mean? I think it means the same thing for me as it should for anybody else, which is that I have a home to live in. I've chosen who I live with, my wife and my children. Children are grown up and left, of course. My neighbors. My neighbor and I share a snowblower because we both have tiny driveways. We don't need one us individually, but we're both growing older and decided that we should share one. That's a good life in community. I have a job, or I used to have a job, and I'm retired. My wife is employed. So, she has a job. So what does a good life in community look like? We have friends that we go out to dinner with, and we're trying to schedule a dinner date with this other couple for the last 3 weeks because our schedules keep getting tossed around. I'm able to welcome my family I welcomed the entire family into my home for Thanksgiving supper and did the turkey and all those. We're not vegetarian. I apologize, but so we did all those kinds of things, and that's what a good life in community means to me. Why can't it mean the same for everybody else that's in this province? We've had, in my career, we've had a couple of small wins along this line of welcoming somebody into my home, a person supported who lives with the assistance of a wheelchair and a number of staff and so on. Their roommates left at Christmas time to go to other places, and that person was able to invite their parents into that small option home. And the parents lost their minds. They actually spent the night there and had a Christmas dinner for the first time ever. They never thought that was possible, that their one and only son would be able to. That's the kind of thing that I mean that a good life in the community means to me, right? And that's a small example of how even in a highly structured, highly resourced, highly regulated small option home, it's possible to create those moments where that person's life was no different than mine, because my parents came to my house for that Christmas dinner. His parents came to his house. Oops, I gave away gender, sorry. That person's parents came to their house for Christmas dinner. Amazing, right? So it is possible, even in very highly structured places and very traditional places, to be able to do that and have a life that resembles everybody else's. But with this remedy, we just opened up the Pandora's box. It's going to be just amazing. It's not just going to be the Christmas dinners. It's going to be regular dinners that people are going to be able to come over for and invite family and friends and so on a regular basis, no matter where they live. Right? So that's what good life means to me.
Thank you, Hillary. It's always a pleasure to see you. I'm so glad you're here. So let the parties begin. There could be parties happening all across Nova Scotia in the near future. So now we're going to take some questions from the audience. And we ask those of you who do have questions to gear the questions to our panel presenters today. I expect there are a lot of questions. It's been a full day already, but we're going to try to do one question from each location. And where am I going next? Now we're going to Randy in Bridgewater, I think. Oh, sorry. Oh, am I right? Thank you.
I know.
Just takes a second to catch up. Yeah, I think we've got you, Randy. Barb, can you ask him to say something?
Could you turn your mic up? Can you try again? Randy, could you say something?
Oh, sure.
There we go.
Okay, we gotcha.
Okay, I'm watching the screen though, and I just didn't see us up, so we weren't speaking. So, are you good for us to go? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry, Barb. We were watching you and not watching what we were doing. Oh well, if anyone was going to mess it up, it was going to be me. Okay, I have the privilege of being here with Elizabeth, and she is a parent, and she has a question for Stephanie, and I'm going to turn it over to her to ask her question.
My son, Brett, lives at Riverview Enhanced Living in Day Spring, just outside of Bridgewater, and he is adamant.
So, I'm going to move closer to the mic.
He is adamant that he is not moving out of REL, and if it comes down to it, is moving back home. So what I want to know is what kind of tips can you give me to talk with Brett, to get him to embrace moving into the community and everything that exists?
Thanks, Elizabeth.
So that's a question for me, I think, Barb? And I don't have an answer for that question because it's a question, but I think that it's really important to think about how, when I think about that type of question, it's a question that we have about our children in general. Full disclosure, I have another child who just moved back home because he's going back to university. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than we thought it was going to be? Yes. Is he going to leave again? Yes. And I think that having those conversations with our kids and with other families who are going through similar things is a really important part of these typical life transitions. So I think you said your son's name is Brett. I think it's maybe about taking tiny steps, about finding his own community, and maybe not yanking the carpet out from underneath him, but finding, one of the things that I've learned through people I've met through the inclusion movement is, find one thing that he'd like to do in community. Maybe it's, joining a gardening club or joining a chess club or going to the gym, and one small thing that other people his age are doing, and then maybe finding his community that way, as opposed to, we're just moving you out, honey, and good luck. I don't know if that answers your question.
to add anything to that? Okay.
Sure. In an ideal world, instead of saying it's a binary choice, a process of saying, would you like to go see? And spend a night with some friends or acquaintances in a hotel room to start with, outside of this place. And if the hotel room experience has been done already, then try the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until the person isn't afraid of the choice that's being presented to them in a binary fashion, which is to say, this is closing, so you have to go there. There is no, it's a 0 and 1. And most of our lives are not that cut and dry. Most of our lives are about stages, and as was just described, a grown child returned to the home for a bit of support while they were doing something else, and they will leave the home. Similarly, we have time to work with Brett, to support him, to explore options, to find out what he might want to do. And that might mean talking to the small option homes in your community and saying, listen, do you have a spare cot? Or do you have a spare, start with something as simple as a spare seat at the table for dinner or a coffee, and start. But if you don't start now to show choice, to experience choice, then the person is faced with this binary choice, which is stay here. Well, I can't stay here, we're closing it. Somebody's going to lock the door, or leave. And where do I go to? Well, the only other place I know is Mama's house, so I'm going to Mama's house. It's as simple as that. And she's saying, no, we're not ready for that, right? Which is cool, which is absolutely cool. But there are other places than Mama's house. And that's how I think, there is no perfect answer, but I think it's how each one of us was introduced to leaving our family homes. And that's how it should be no different for Brett. Right?
Thank you. And now we're off to Sydney for our second question.
Okay, I've got Neha here. She works at Breton Ability Center, and she's got a question for the panel. Here we go.
I actually have not one but three main questions because it is also related to this, but I'm going to be quick because I know we are short of time. So the first question is, even if you want to take them out and have them live in a hotel and give them the choice of community, there are people who have been living in the centers for years. They grew up over there for 20, 30 years. Like I work at Breton Ability Center, I have seen there are people who want to live in the center with those people for the rest of their life. So even if you give them a choice, they would still, because it's a choice, so they would want to live in the center. So why are we actually forcing them to go into the community, live independently? It's not, like, I know independence is a good thing for a person, but at the same time, they can be independent living in that center too. Because of the clients that I deal with, some of them work, they go to attend classes at the school. And the other thing is also because if the people are living in a center, there is a building inside the premises of Breton Ability Center where people go. It's known as Learning Employment Center. They go, attend classes, they learn the skills, and they get a job. So if you put everybody, like if you spread everybody out inside the island or in Nova Scotia as a whole, I don't know, do we have enough resources to take them out for classes and do other activities? Because it's nearby right now inside the entire center. There are people, like there's a client I know, she is wheelchair bound. She might not want to go in the community and then having to transport her every day. She might not be comfortable. I don't want to go into the van and, get transported from one place to another. And right now she's in the center and she knows it's only nearby. I go to the building, go to attend class and come back. do the rec therapy, come back. So that is one thing. So do we have enough resources to have so many recreation therapists? We are struggling with the nurses, RCW, and CCA staff right now. Do we know that we will be able to generate enough human resources for that purpose? So I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
No, this is great. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So we're going to let them chew on that a little bit and get our panelists to provide a response.
Yeah.
Thank you, Neha.
Yeah, who would like to respond to that? I mean, I think this morning, we heard a really good sense of the plan to come and how community resources are going to be created and how capacity is going to be built. So I think we have heard that. I'm wondering if Charles might like to respond
Yeah, I could
to
answer
this.
that.
Okay, Charles, thank you.
I can see where she's coming from, I really can. Because I went from, as a kid, I went from group home to group home, place to place. They shipped me off and everything. Really, it's, we are trying to give people a choice of where they want to live, what they want to do. And it's just, to do the rights mostly, it's not that we're forcing people from place to place. It's just we're trying to, I can't think of the word. Give them the supports they need.
Thank you, Charles. And I think that's what individualization, individualized funding, and choice means for people, that people get to choose the life that they're going to live. And I think that this is what is so incredibly important for us in Nova Scotia. It is a landmark case. We are being watched not only within Canada, but across the world. We are going to make strides in how we support individuals with disabilities and their families in Nova Scotia. So we're now going to Truro.
Barb, could I
sorry.
add to that? I'm sorry for jumping in, sorry. I think in analogies. So if you imagine, I kind of feel like Nova Scotia has been kind of a cute little diner, you know, and I've been ordering from a menu of about 10 items. And for me, individualized choice and personal choice and the human rights to make choice, I feel like there's this huge curtain that's been pulled aside and there's this gorgeous, fancy restaurant next door that I can now order from. And I think that for people who have lived an institutional life, they may say, I'm happy ordering from this cute little diner, but I think that we actually need to, in a supported way, thoughtfully and in a very respectful way, help them see that there's this gorgeous restaurant out there that we can order from.
Great, that's great, Stephanie, thank you. And we're off to Truro for another question.
Thanks, Barb. Sean Marshall here in Truro. And we have a question from a First Voice. We have Tim Ferris here, and he lives in New Glasgow, and he has a question for, I believe, Hillary.
Oops.
So in regards to individuals have the right to choose their staff, how will this work in regards to unionized organizations in terms of seniority?
Thank you for that question, Tim. I think it's so. When I was asked the first question around what did I like about this remedy, and I said there's a whole new set of opportunities in front of us, including learning a new language. So and the us in this case includes the people that are employed in the sector, whether they're organized by a union or whether they're not organized by the union, they, along with ourselves, are going to have to learn a whole new language and a whole new way of interacting with each other, of respecting each other, and of supporting the people who are looking for our supports, looking for those supports to get through the activities of daily life or even social life, as the case may be. So I don't have a cut and dry answer for you, Tim. What I do have is the recognition that everybody has to come in with an open mind to figure out these solutions. And these aren't cut and dry solutions. They aren't in place already. We have to develop them. We have to create them. And I'm very glad you put it front and center, because that's something that everybody needs to pay attention to, because at the end of the day, if one avenue of individualized funding, Tim, would be that you have control of the money, or you and your support decision-making team have control of the money. And then you get to therefore decide who and how and when and why and where that money gets spent. Right? It's as simple as that. But then you get into the complexities of saying, okay, how do we schedule somebody to come and work? How do we make it attractive for you, for that person to come and work with you and for you and to support you? And that's when you also have to come into the conversation about flexibility, about creating new solutions. So it's not just Hillary and an agency and a union and government and all those others out there, but also yourself, as to how much responsibility you will share in this process of building a life that is meaningful for you in the community.
Would anyone?
I have something I'd like to add to that. When I first went to Metro Community Living, I was told that, and I don't think it's right, that you can't pick your staff, or like you could be working with someone that you don't like. And I can see where Tim's coming from. Like, we should be able to choose our staff, but it's not that way, and I think that needs to change.
I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. But we're at the place now where we have to figure out how we get to that place, Charles.
Exactly.
How we do it respectfully, not just of yourself, but also of the people that said, I'm going to make a commitment to working in and with and for the Charleses and the Tims of this world, right? So that's what I mean when we say we have to create that solution. And I'm glad you're going to be part of that conversation.
Now I believe we're going to take questions from our audience here. Okay. Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Two-part question, and first,
Oops.
Hillary, how do you, Hillary, how do service providers help us find apartments?
Right now, Jane, we do it the hard way. Like everybody else, we are scrambling to find apartments that are of a sufficient quality, at a reasonable price, that affordable, accessible, all those things. Now, we got into such a crisis locally in New Glasgow while I was still executive director that despite Maria's objections, our agency ended up buying an apartment building. So that it was just a 4-unit apartment building. So all the solutions are on the table, but the reality is that there aren't enough apartments out there for everybody in this province. And people that are supported through the Disability Support Program are no different than any other Nova Scotian in terms of their ability to access a home. It is a challenge, so we keep working on it, but it can only be done in partnership. It's not like I found you an apartment, you're going to move in. It's going to be you and the service provider are going to have to work together to find that place. And sometimes, like for all of us, it may mean moving from something that's less than ideal towards something that's more ideal as over time.
Thank you, Hillary. And the second part is for Charles. Charles, what struggles did you have finding an apartment?
Well, my struggles are like rent is so high right now, and I can own in DSP only allows you so much for rent. That is another thing. Like with this remedy, they say they're going to put all these people in houses, but where are all these houses going to come from? And there's hardly any apartments out there for people with disabilities or just people in general. It is very hard to find an apartment. I was lucky I found the apartment that I did find that I just moved into. But it is very hard.
So you must be really happy having your own apartment and living an inclusive life.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Charles and Hillary.
Thanks for the questions. We're going to go back to Truro, Sydney, and we'll come back here for another question as well. However, I believe we started in Bridgewater. So we're going to go to Bridgewater.
Oh. Do you want Truro or Bridgewater?
Did we have Bridgewater first?
Truro.
Okay, Truro. Sorry.
No, we got Bridgewater.
It's my fault. Truro. We can go to Truro. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Barb. It's Sean again in Truro.
Okay.
I have a question from a family member in the audience. I'm going to ask on their behalf. It's from Danny in Halifax. And they're curious about what type of activities are available for participants and in general. So what kind of activities would it look like in a given day or a given period of time?
Who would like to answer that from the panel?
I can start.
Staff, go ahead.
The same activities as anybody in there who has the same interests that they do. Going back to my analogy, my example, if you like gardening, you can garden. If you like bicycle riding, you can ride a bicycle. If you want to play chess, you can play chess. I think that part of the switch that we have to make as Nova Scotians is to understand that inclusion is not a program, it's not a building, it's living a typical life where we pursue our interests and our talents and the things we like to do, just like you do and just like I do. And that might change. Maybe today I like knitting. Maybe a year from now I want to join a choir. Those things are a typical life path, and to me it's not about what programs does my son follow, does my son attend, it's about what does he want to do. The same as it is for his two brothers.
Thank you. Charles, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would actually. I can relate to that question because I'm in ILS, Independent Living Support, And we need more activities. Like, we don't do anything at all. Like, it's just, it's hard because the money's not, it comes back to the money. The money's not there. The sports, so, yes, I have staff support, but they can only support you for so many hours. And it's just, the time's not there to do outings. It's very frustrating.
Thank you for sharing that frustration, and we hope that that's going to change.
So can I just
Please.
jump in on that? Charles, you raised a really good example of what it means to live in the community by yourself. And I think there are a couple of solutions there that all of us are going to have to figure out on how we move forward, because I think implied in the question was, what are the activities to which my family member will be accompanied to attend, as opposed to the very real comment that was made from Sydney around the same activities that everybody else has access to. So when it comes to somebody who needs accompaniment, now the cost of that activity has not just been the free admission, but the cost of the staff person, the transportation, all the other things that go with it. And so for ILS in particular, I think service providers and the funder are going to have to rethink how some of these goals are achieved. And the goals might have to be achieved through a series of compromises where somebody who, if there are 3 people in an ILS program, maybe they each contribute a half hour of their time or an hour of their time to communally do something together. That might be the compromise, that you don't get to do this individually because it's not affordable given the resource package that's available to you. But with 2 other people who happen to be friends, I hope, and a shared staff person, the accompanied activity can happen. But it's that kind of creative thinking until we come up with the ideal solution, that we'll have to work with some compromises in between. So I fully appreciate what you're saying, Charles, because people living in an ILS situation in a rural community that has no public transit, for example, it becomes really cost prohibitive to go even to a free admission event, right? So yeah, that's the only answer I can give you for now. And my hope is that with the remedy, some of these issues will get addressed collectively and will evolve to find better answers.
And it's not just ILS.
You're right.
I used to live in the group home that I'm in ILS under, and it was Shady Oaks. For them to do stuff with their clients, it's hard to do stuff with their clients, because then it comes back to the money. It comes back to the mileage. Because I'm not throwing Metro Community Living under the bus, but some agencies, they complain about mileage, but then they say they want their clients to do more activities. There has to be a give and go.
Thank you for sharing. We're now going to go to Sydney for another question, and then we'll come back here for our last question.
There has to be.
Okay, I've got Denise. She's a service provider here in the area. Denise?
I'm from Society for Treatment of Autism. And this question, I guess, would be for Stephanie and Charles. And what do you think is going to be the impact on families as a whole with the remedy?
Remedy.
You want to take that first, Stephanie?
Sorry, I just had to have someone tell me back the question because somebody was speaking to me on the side there. So what do you think is going to be the impact on families as a whole with the remedy? I think that right now, families like mine families who have young adult and adult children, it's going to be hard because we really need to completely, as Hillary said, we have to change our mindset. We have to constantly be thinking critically. How do I change my language? How do I change the way that I look at what the opportunities are for the life of my loved one in community? So I think it's going to be about relearning. I think it's going to be super important for families to come together and to come together, have opportunities to come together. And I think it's important for community services to support that. And I think it's important for community to support that families who want to build an inclusive life for their loved one in community need to be able to come together to hash it out. Because it's not, when I used the restaurant analogy before, I mean, wouldn't it be nice if somebody could just bring it to my table and it's all perfect for my family? That's not what it's like. But I think that we need to be able to come together and go, well, what's working for you? What's working for me? What's not working? Here's an idea. And families need to be able to come together and have those conversations, and also learn from families outside of Nova Scotia who have figured a few of these things out. And I think that, you know, going back to what I said, I think one of my answers to the questions, I've always kind of raised my son with this cliff at the end of high school. And it's awful, and I don't ever want families to feel that again. And I think it's so hopeful for families to know, when I you know, I'm a teacher, and I teach in an elementary school, and I look at the families of those kids, and when their children are going through junior high and high school, maybe they're not even going to know about the cliff. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're not even going to know about the cliff, and I think that's really exciting, and it kind of gives me goosebumps.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question for me?
The impact on families, Charles. What will the impact be on families?
And this is as honest as I can be, I'm not sure. It's just, we don't know what's going to happen down the road.
That's true.
It's true.
That's true. Thank you. And, okay, thank you. So, did you want to add anything, Hillary?
No.
Okay, so we are actually going to go back to Bridgewater for a question, and then we will come here. So, Bridgewater, you are on.
So I'm here with Rose. Rose is a participant, and she has a question.
What are they going to do about foster care? Like when people are, because I went through 33 foster homes as a child, in and out of the NS twice, and how are we going to stop that from happening to other people? Is what I'd like to know. Like whoever wants to answer that can answer.
Who would like to take that question?
I'll take that.
Okay.
The boys, Charles.
Go, Charles.
I really know where you're coming from, because since when I was a kid, I was in and out of foster homes, and I noticed, like what you're saying, a lot of people are going into foster care, and like, I really don't know how we would be able to stop that, but the remedy would probably have to put something in place to make sure that doesn't happen, because I know what foster care is like, and no one belongs in my opinion, no one belongs in foster care.
Thank you, Charles.
So, at the risk of coming over the top of what Charles had to say, the reality is that it's a human rights remedy, and the last time I checked, human rights applies to children as well as to adults. So is there legislation and programs and support systems that have to change throughout the province and throughout all government services? Yes. Are they going to happen overnight? Probably not. But it is a process, Rose, that will happen in context of each person's human rights.
Stephanie, did you want to add anything?
Sure, yeah. Children are born into families. And the advocacy for an inclusive life starts at birth, at diagnosis, and continues on. And it is so important. And I know that the remedy is about supporting individuals who are adults, but the year before an individual with an intellectual disability becomes an adult, they're a youth with an intellectual disability, and they are part of a family. And families desperately, desperately need support and do not get the adequate supports. And it's kind of it's a little off script, my kind of remedy part 2, or maybe, the prequel to the remedy is adequate supports for families. Families of kids with disabilities, it's income tested, it incentivizes poverty, and families need adequate supports. If families are given adequate supports to ensure that their child, at whatever age, has the support that they need to live a fully inclusive life in community, then when they become an adult, it will be the expectation. Communities will build around that. It's not just, ta-da, you're 19, and now here's the remedy in a cup for you. It starts at birth. And so we need to have that support for families right from the very beginning. And it's not happening in Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Stephanie.
It really should be happening. This remedy should include foster care, small options. It really should.
Thank you, Charles. And I think it speaks to, historically in Nova Scotia, all parents have heard is you can have this or nothing, and this has been institutions or very little support in the past with very little choice. So we want that to change for families, and Stephanie is right. If families are being supported from birth on, we are going to grow strong, independent individuals who are going to be able to go out into life and build an incredible life for themselves. So, without further ado, we have one more question, I believe, in here in Dartmouth. Lisa, thank you.
I'm here with Connor, and he has a question, and I think we probably want to start with Stephanie, but it could be maybe anybody.
What if my parents don't agree with my choices? Will I have to do what they say? Can I be 35 in 3 weeks?
Connor, nice to see you. You absolutely don't have to do what they say because you're turning 35 in 3 weeks, just like my kids don't need to do what I say when they're 26 in 2 weeks. You know what, Connor, I will say, I'm older than you are. I go to my family, I go to my parents, I go to my family and ask them and say, what do you think about this? Do you think I should buy the pink bowl or the blue bowl? And they can give me their advice, and ultimately I'm going to make my own decision. So you can ask your parents what they think if you want to, but ultimately your choice is your choice. And I think back to John, who is truly one of the wisest people I know and someone I've learned a lot from, and I hope I continue to learn from him. And John talking about, you need to accept that I have my right to make my own choices, but that doesn't mean you're going to agree with my choices. And Connor, you have a right to your choices, and that does not mean that I or anybody else or your parents are going to agree with it. And that's life.
Thank you.
Hi, so my question is, as someone who lives in a small office home and is looking to go into the ILS program, what would the transition be like for that? Do I have a say in where I want to live? I have an idea of the apartment building I want to live in, that's close to my work or school, that can also
Perhaps I'll take a crack at trying to answer that question. So the first challenge for somebody coming out of a family home or a small option home or whatever it is the reality that you go from living with a bunch of people, some of whom are there telling you what to do, others who are there helping you with what you want to do, but there's always somebody there. And all the hours of your day are somehow filled, sometimes by yourself, but if it's not filled by yourself, then by somebody else who's going to program it for you. So you go to the ILS program, and there's nobody programming your life for you anymore. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for everybody who leaves their family home at age 18 or age 25 or age 35. It doesn't really matter. How do I fill the empty hours between when I come home from work? Did I remember to leave the chicken out to thaw so I can cook it fairly quickly and not starve myself until 11 o'clock in the evening before I have my supper, that kind of stuff, right? So there's a whole different skill set, if you will, that everybody needs to learn as they move out to live on their own. Some of us do it successfully, and some of us have to have a couple of tries at it. So a person living in a small option home, I'm hoping that the support agency and the support staff are working with that person to develop that skill set, to get out and live on their own independently, including a couple of trial runs of going to an apartment and not having staff around or anybody else around, and just dealing with the fact that there's 4 walls and myself, right? Amen. So that's sort of one of those challenges, and right now, I think you said you live in a small option home, so you have the opportunity to work with that, to develop those skills and those abilities, if you don't have them already. The challenge about where do I get to live, can I find a place close to my place of work, has nothing whatsoever to do with your agency, your support agency. It has to do with the marketplace of available apartments close to your place of work, right? Now, if your place of work is in a highly dangerous neighborhood and there's highly dangerous apartments in that close by available, your support agency might say, please don't move there, right? But if you do, at the end of the day, you do. And earlier there was a conversation about choice. With choice comes responsibility. So despite the best advice, you make a choice, and with that choice, there's risk. You have to accept that risk and the responsibility that comes with that risk. I hope that answers your question to some extent. Okay.